I'm going to explain you a few things about a demo that we shared a few weeks ago in Las Vegas and then in the European Collaboration Summit. That's me, so I want to save time. I just want to say you follow me on Twitter if you like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Everything else, you can read it by yourself. And let's move to the actual content of this demo. So just to set the context, what we want to share with you and show you is a demo of a dashboard for an hypothetical Contoso Retail company, which works in the fashion market, because what else? I'm from Italy, so what else? And well, the idea is that Contoso Retail wants to have a dashboard to do monitoring of sales, revenues, and returns of products, as well as they want to be able to access some of this information from a mobile device. So we created a full demo solution where you can have a Teams-based UI through a personal app in Teams, as well as you will shortly see that we can also see this solution running in Outlook.com and in the Microsoft 365 portal, as well as with an extension for Microsoft Viva, which we cover in one of the future demos in these calls. So from a technological scenario, we are using SharePoint Framework in this solution, and we are using SPFx just because nowadays, and since version 1.17.x of SharePoint Framework, we can really easily host SPFx web parts, not only in SharePoint Online and in Teams, but also in the Microsoft 365 portal and in Outlook.com. And I said that this solution is a full solution that you can inspiration from, and in fact at the end of this presentation you will also see and have a link to download the source code of this demo from GitHub, and in this sample solution you can also find a back-end infrastructure based on an Azure function that you can host wherever you like. And you will be able to see how you can define a proper architecture for a SharePoint Framework solution to consume such a backend API. So stop talking and let's move to the actual demo. First of all, let me share with you how the demo looks like in the end user experience. So this is the Contoso Retail dashboard running in Teams. As you can see, this has a nice looking UI with a bunch of reports and graphics and charts to let people evaluate how the retail company is performing. And you can switch across different tabs in this personal application of Teams. In fact, you can see here we have an icon to activate our personal app, and we can go through all of the tabs that we created, and we can browse through the products that we have in our product inventory. It is interesting to notice also that this is a SharePoint Framework solution, but it is multi-tab as any other Team solution, and I will explain you how we did it. And you can also make it configurable even if it is a personal app. In fact, we made it possible to click on a setting or a gear icon and configure the app to work either with a set of mock data, just to speed up your learning process when you want just to play with this demo without any external dependency, or you can eventually disable the mock data and consume an external API, which will be the REST API hosted on an Azure function that I was talking about before. What is interesting is that this dashboard can also be used inside Outlook.com. And in fact, nowadays, if you click on the More Apps button, you can find additional applications, including your custom applications. And here you can see the Contoso Retail dashboard running inside the Outlook.com application. So this is, I think, really powerful because your end users can use your application wherever they are more comfortable to work with. And in fact, the same happen if they are in the Office portal or in the Microsoft 365 portal. So if they go to www.microsoft365.com and they click on the apps, right here they can still find the same application, and they will be able to see inside the wireframe of the Microsoft 365 portal the same app running with exactly the same set of functionalities. So this is really, really powerful. So now Last thing I want to show you through the browser, and then I will switch to Visual Studio Code. As you can see, this demo is deployed in the app catalog of my tenant. As you can see right here, this is the application. And from here, from the modern and new UI of the app catalog, we can easily see that this application can be executed on SharePoint, on Teams, and does also have an extension for Viva Connections, which I will not cover in this demo, but eventually in a future demo. So let me switch to Visual Studio Code and let's start talking about how we created this solution. But first of all, it is a regular SharePoint Framework solution. So you simply do yo@microsoft/SharePoint and you do the scaffolding of your solutions. Once we have done that, you can create as many web parts as you like in your solution. For example, and let me briefly switch back to the UI. You can see here we have 3 tabs, the home, the dashboard, and the inventory. And here we have precisely 3 web parts, the retail dashboard, retail home, and retail inventory, which are the 3 tabs that we see in the Teams app solution or in the Outlook or Office portal solution. Let's focus on one of them because it's all the same story for all of them. For example, the home one. In the home web part, we just have a really regular SharePoint Framework web part. And inside this web part, we render a React component which will do the actual rendering of the UI of our tab inside of the personal app. What is interesting, however, is that in the manifest, we declare that the supported hosts are not only the SharePoint web part hosting model, but also the Teams personal app and the Teams tab. And okay, in this one, we also have the SharePoint full page. But what really matters for our demo is that we are going to support the hosting of this web part inside Microsoft Teams as a Teams personal app. Then, inside the Teams folder that you get scaffolded in every SharePoint Framework solution that you create with the Yeoman generator for SharePoint Framework, you also have the Teams folder in which you can create a manifest file for Teams. That's what we did here. So here I'm using version 1.16 of the Teams manifest. And in this one, aside from the definition of the icons that I want to use and the description and name for my custom Teams application, I also have the static tabs section. And in this one, I have the 3 tabs, which represents the home, the dashboard, and the inventory tabs of my personal app. And as you can see right here, every single static tab does have a URL, which is dynamic based on the hosting tenant. But at the very end, in the right part of the URL, there will be a component ID, which will be provided as a query string parameter to the Teams hosted app.SPFx file. And this ID is nothing more than the GUI that we have in the web part. For example, let's still focus on the home one. Here we have the unique ID of my web part. So basically in this manifest file, I'm simply declaring that every single tab with its own entity ID, which is the part we see right here when we browse to any of the tabs in my personal application, I want to render one web part or the other or yet another one. So that's really simple. Once you create such kind of manifest.json file, you can create a zip file, including the 2 icons and the manifest. You can call it Teams SPFx app.zip. And when you will do the bundle and package of your SharePoint Framework solution, and then you will upload it into the app catalog, the server-side infrastructure of SharePoint Framework will be able to understand that there is a custom zip file with a custom manifest and will use it to do the actual provisioning of the Teams application inside the Teams catalog of apps to make your application available in Teams and also and automatically in Outlook.com and Office.com. So the whole process is, I think, really straightforward. You simply create your web part, you configure a manually defined manifest, you create the zip file, you deploy and package the solution and upload it to the app catalog. And when you will do that, you simply say, okay, make it available in Teams, which means in the app catalog, when you select any of the solution, you can do the add to Teams, or you can simply select to sync the application to Teams when you upload it the first time into the app catalog. So that's the very basic story. And I think it is a really powerful story. Now, that said, let me dig into the demo a little bit more, and let me explain you why something like 5 minutes ago I said that this is a solution that you should take inspiration from. And the reason why is that this is not just, let me say, a fake demo that you can use just to show that you can do something nice, you know, but it is actually a real demo of something that you can do in your real production environment with a proper architecture definition. In fact, let me go back to Visual Studio Code and let me dig again into the home web part now with a little bit more of details. For example, in the on init of my web part, I rely on a pattern that we have in SharePoint Framework, which allows us to have a set of service classes that we want to use to consume external services or functionalities. And in the solution, you will find a services folder in which you can see we have an abstract definition of a setting service, which we can use to load and save the settings for our personal application. Maybe you know, maybe not, but I'm going to tell you that when you create a static tab in Teams, that static tab is not by default configurable. And that's the reason why in Teams we have the configurable tabs, which are those that you use in a chat or in a channel. And then we have the static tabs, which are those that are by default not configurable. However, in this demo, you can see how you can still make it configurable. And in fact, as I showed you, you have a gear icon that you can press, and you can configure some settings, whether you are in Teams or in Outlook or wherever else you are hosting your solution. How do we do that? Well, we have an abstract setting service, and we have a concrete implementation of the setting service where we use PnP.js, which is, like always, really useful and powerful. And with PnP.js, we simply rely on the storage entities that we have at the tenant level, so that we store inside the tenant the settings for our personal application, which also means that we have in this sample the experience of an administrator who can configure the personal app with the settings, which will be shared across all of the users. What I mean is that an administrator like I am right now will have the gear icon and will be able to configure the personal app. Any other user who is not an administrator will simply get the personal app properly configured with the settings defined by the administrator. And to do that, we use an external service, this one, the setting service, which will simply rely on the service scope pattern of SharePoint Framework, so that in the web part we can say, please, dear SPFx context, dear because we are friends, dear SPFx context, through the service scope, please let me consume the setting service. I will get back an instance of the setting service, and I will use it to load or to save the settings. And the same happens for the service that we use to load the actual data that we show. So, for example, we can say if we want to use mock data, so in the settings we define to use mock data, we rely on a fake retail data service instance. Or if we want to use real data, we use the retail data service, which will rely on an actual REST API, which we are going to consume from our application. But we don't have any of the complexities of consuming the REST API inside the web part, but actually inside an external service that we rely on. And this is a better architecture if you think about that, because you can share this kind of service across multiple web parts, as we are doing right here, where we share the same services in the dashboard, in the inventory, and in the home. So this is just to give you an idea of how you should define and structure the architecture of your solution. Then, in the retail home React component, which is the one in charge of rendering the actual UI of our home tab, we use the dashboard component, which is provided by PnP in the PnP React controls for SPFx. And this dashboard control gives you all the plumbing out of the box ready to be used to create a dashboard so that you can simply focus on implementing every single widget that makes up your dashboard. So in my demo, again, this is the return volume is a widget, the current inventory is another widget, and so on and so forth. Every single widget is just based on a dedicated React component that we can share across multiple tabs if needed. So again, we have a modular architecture based on a bunch of React components in a hierarchy of components. And what we do whenever we create any of these components is to provide them the actual instances of the data service and of the setting service so that they know how to do and what to do with those services in order to read and write data and to render data in our render. So this was just to give you an idea of what you can do when you want to create a real solution in SharePoint Framework with a proper architecture. You can find the solution on the samples gallery that we were talking about at the beginning of this meeting. And in the next slide that I'm going to show you before closing, you can also find a QR code if you want to go straight there without writing the URL. So in the upper link, you have the demo source code. In the lower link, you have a blog post that was written by Visa a few months ago, which explains you the details about what we have just seen from a hosting perspective or a SharePoint Framework web part in Teams, Outlook.com, and Office.com. And I think that's all for me as well. So thank you, and back to you, Visa.
Excellent, excellent, really, really cool. Good to see the crowd going wild as well.